Well, I'm rolling around the words integrated ocean management in my head, trying to find the poetry, and I'm not quite there yet, but I know we're going to discuss that phrase much more. And it is interesting to hear how ambitious Norway is to be a leader in this discussion of managing the future of our oceans, not just the Arctic, of course. And this is a global issue with a global challenge behind it, and that's why I'm so delighted that this panel reflects many international perspectives. So our next speaker is somebody who works at the UN's Food and Agriculture Organization. He is the director of the Fisheries and Aquaculture Policy and Resources Division. So please do welcome Manuel Barange. Manuel, over to you.
Thank you, Stephen. And let's take a selfie later on. I'm a great fan. Minister, Secretary, dignitaries, ladies and gentlemen, let me just start by asking you to reflect on two important realities in the world today. First is that for the first time in history, we are moving towards a future that in many ways we can predict. Of course, I'm referring to climate change. We don't know the magnitude of it in the future, but we know it will be warmer, with changes in precipitation, in storms, in glacier and ice cover. Never before in history have we had the privilege and responsibility of this level of knowledge. Second is that we have never been more aware of the enormity of the impact of the human species. I'm not just referring to population size, but also that social media and information overload have amplified an overwhelming feeling of crowdedness and hopelessness. One of the consequences of this is that we boost our differences rather than our commonalities, and we easily challenge the validity of your solution if it is not my solution. You may be wondering what does this to do with fisheries and Arctic fisheries, but just bear with me. Last week, an academic paper was published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Science of the US, showing that those fish stocks around the world subject to scientific assessments have on average been growing in biomass and on average are in good health. You might be surprised about this because it was not reported in the media. These results show that fisheries management works, giving credibility to the fishery management and governments around the world that are willing to take strong action. This is important for the Arctic because Arctic countries have, by and large, a history of exploiting their resources sustainably and cooperatively. It's not the case in many parts of the world, especially in places subject to political instability, poverty, and hunger, where I spend most of my time. Now, there are two main things that will happen in the Arctic and subarctic fisheries in the era of climate change. First, species will shift distributions. This means new species will arrive, like hake and tuna in Norway already, while some will move out. And second, species productivities will change, with some benefiting from increases in primary production and warming, for example, caught in the Barents Sea, while others will suffer. Overall, science tells us that climate change is expected to improve fish yields in the Arctic and subarctic regions, while the opposite will be experienced in the tropics. But these potentially positive impacts, among a myriad of negative ones, are not assured unless we do three things. First, adapt institutions. Many resources are shared between countries and some regional arrangements are already in place. But as species shift, they will bring conflict between stakeholders if current institutions do not have the geographical coverage or political mandate to cope and evolve. Second, adapt management. This is the easiest adaptation in places where management is already up to a good standard, but we will need changes in the target species, in the reference points, the gear and season permits, etc. And third, educate consumers. This is the most difficult of all. We should all eat the fish of the day. We capture over 2,000 species of fish, mollusks and crustaceans, and we culture over 600 of them. We're going to need profound market and consuming adaptation programs around the world if we are to change our relationship with our natural environment to a more dynamically adaptive one. The above comments apply mostly to coastal and continental shelf fisheries. The Central Arctic, as mentioned yesterday, is subject to a legally binding moratorium to prevent unregulated commercial fishing. It is not yet known if there are exploitable fish resources in the Central Arctic or if there will be in the future. But the moratorium says that scientific monitoring and research will have to be conducted before it can be revisited. My time is almost up, but let me finish by commenting on yesterday's conversation on the appropriateness of current institutions to cope with the changes that are coming. And let me link it to my initial contention that we are moving towards a future with much knowledge, but much uneasiness over how to work out solutions as a species. Yes, it may well be that our institutions are not as fit for purpose as we would like. But note that the current political climate is not one in favor of multilateralism. I see this tendency every week in my job. Given the chance, there would be voices that would claim unfitness of purpose to eliminate multilateral processes that currently provide significant checks and balances. Not all global problems demand global solutions, but all global problems require multilateral mechanisms and institutions to discuss options and trade-offs. Without them, we will continue to hope we will solve problems by pointing fingers. And I have not seen any problem being truly solved in that way, no matter how much knowledge we have at our disposal. Thank you.